First Things, episode number 49.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So good to have you back with me again today, and we are in episode number 49. I cannot believe this. One episode away from our 50th episode. It's hard to believe that we have spent nearly 50 weeks on many of these topics. Some of you have been with me from the very beginning. Some of you are new with me, and I definitely appreciate wherever you joined this journey with me. Now, last week, we talked about passions and how to find your passions, how to tap into those things. I want to kind of do a follow-up to that particular topic from last week. I want to mention a few extra things that I've been thinking about since that episode. But today I'm going to be talking about the secret to success. What is the road to success? What is it all about? We've talked about passion from last week, and I do think that knowing your passion is extremely important. But all passion will do is make sure that you are pointed in the right direction. It is not enough to get you there. And I find that a lot of self-help books and podcasts kind of mention passion as almost it's the only ingredient. And I do think it's a very important thing for us to know, but just knowing your passion does not enable you to get in the direction of the passion. It doesn't actually help you arrive at the destination. It just points you in the right direction, so at least you know what your true north is. And you know that you're going north and not south or east or west. It helps define direction for you, but it doesn't enable you to actually get there. So what are some of the basic elements of success? And I'm going to share with you some things today that may not be just extremely positive, but I think they're very realistic. And I wish I had somebody in my life 20, 30 years ago who would have told me some of the things we're going to talk about today. The very secret to success. Because again, a lot of people make it sound like all you need to do is find your passion, then pursue it, then everything falls into place from then on. And that is actually further from the truth. So let's talk a little bit extra about passion from last week. I said a lot of things back then, and as I thought about it, I actually listened to the episode, because usually I do listen to the episodes after I publish them, not because I'm infatuated with my voice, but I'm always listening to it to hear troubles, difficulties, how I could have done things a little bit better, things like that. And there's a few things I want to mention again about passions. And first of all, passions can change over time. I didn't really say this last week, but there are some passions that stick with us almost our entire lives, such as the music thing for me, as I've mentioned that many, many times. That's always been there. But there are some things that I have passions about that I didn't think I would have passions for, or I didn't even know about them or wasn't aware of them 5, 10, 15 years ago, such as doing this kind of podcast. I never thought about doing something like this. I mentioned to you last week when I initially was in college, I was not thinking about being a teacher. I came from a very long line of teachers on both sides of my family. And I remember thinking teaching is the last thing that I want to do. Some of you I know can sympathize with that. When you have something that runs in your family job-wise, it's sometimes the very last thing you really want to do. And how you express your passions can be very different. For example, I'm teaching right now, but I'm teaching differently than I did 20 years ago when I was teaching college algebra at a junior college. So your passions can change over time. You can develop new passions that you never realized you have. You may have some passions that you put aside because they no longer resonate as much with you. How you express your passions can change over time. So you express it one way today, but a year from now, 5 years from now, you may express your passions completely different or in a different manner. So we must be careful that we don't feel like we're locking it down. We've got to learn to approach life with a loose grip on life and not a tight grip. Because anytime we really clench our fist around something and we say, this is the way it is and it will always be this way, that's just not a great place to live. And passions are one of these things that sometimes people think aren't fluid, and they're what they always were, like you are predestined for a particular passion in life. And no, these can change over time. I'm always amazed at even things as simple as TV shows with me. I would go and miss a complete series on TV because I'm so busy and doing other things, and then I will watch the entire series in a week or so. I did this with Lost. I never saw Lost when it was on TV. I heard about it, heard good things about it, and then one day it was on Netflix, and I decided, hey, will watch the first episode and see what I think. Well, I watched it, and I was hooked. So I literally watched, I think there was 7 seasons, 7 years of Lost, I think. I watched all of those in a matter of like a month or 2 months or something like that. Watched the entire thing. I realized I had a passion for the show that I never knew was there. I'd missed it for 7 years. While I could have realized that passion, I didn't. I'm the same way right now with The Walking Dead. My family was paying me a visit a few weeks ago, and they're all into this Walking Dead. And I was just not going to get into it. I thought it was kind of stupid. I don't really like zombie type things. And I thought, I'm not going to watch this. Well, there was some kind of marathon on while they were here. And I was doing my work and just watching these episodes out of the corner of my eye while I started getting interested in it. So lo and behold, after they left, I pulled up Netflix and watched like 3 seasons of that show in a week or so. I discovered a passion that I never knew I had for this show. And I know this is kind of a trivial example, but the fact is, again, that passions can change. Passions can arise that didn't even exist before a particular incident. So be aware of that and allow your passions to be a bit fluid. The other thing that I wanted to mention and forgot is the fact that you do actually have more than one passion in your life. Sometimes you read these self-help or you go to these entrepreneurial sites and they make it sound like there's one and only one passion in your life. And what is that? Oh, you're supposed to start your own business. You're supposed to write a book. You're supposed to, and it's given almost like that's the only thing that you love to do. That's your only passion. And so some people look at their lives and they can't identify like this one supreme example of something. Or they may come to their life and say, well, you know, I have a lot of these smaller things that I'm passionate about, but I don't really feel like I have one that's just like the king of the castle. And therefore they stay confused when they hear these messages. They think, what's wrong with me? I don't seem to have any passions. The fact is, I think we all have multiple passions. I wouldn't be surprised if every single person listening to me now has at least 5 to 20 passions in your life, all of them at different levels. So you have some that are heavy resonators with you and things that are just a small blip on your radar screen, but they are a passion for you. You love it. You want to be involved in it. You want to absorb yourself in it, but it may not be something that you want to go out and quit your job over today. And listen, there's nothing wrong with pursuing one or all of your passions. One of the biggest problems I've always felt with me, and I've realized it's not really a problem, it's just the fact I have more than one passion in life. I used to think it was a big problem that I had so many interests. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to teach. I wanted to do this podcast. I want to do music. I like going to movies. I could be a movie critic. I mean, I just keep adding to this list of things that I really, really love doing. I want to learn Greek language. I just can't stop. And so many times I used to think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just pick one thing and focus on? Because I look at some people and it looks like they're totally absorbed with music and they can't think anything but music. 24/7, music, music, music. I look at somebody else and it's all about movies. And I look about somebody else and it's all about art. And I thought, what's wrong with me? My life would be so much easier if I could just find one thing and just focus on that only. Well, guess what? I'm not abnormal. And if you're like that, you're not abnormal either. I think it is very typical that we have multitudes of passions at various degrees, various levels. And the whole point of last week, again, is that we should be pursuing our passions. And get out of your mind that it's one supreme passion. There's some of you listening, you may have only one supreme passion, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I think a majority of us, we have multiple passions in various degrees, and the whole point is find what resonates with you and go after those things. Try to incorporate them in your life in some way. It may not mean that you're going to make money off of it or a career out of it, and that's not the point. The point is not that our passions turn into money or a career. They may, but that's not the point. The point is to find things that resonate with you and then do them. So, for example, you may have a passion to cook, but that doesn't mean you have to be a cook in a restaurant or anything like that, that you have to make money off of it or a career out of it. You can simply cook for friends and family. There's nothing wrong with that, and it could be as equally satisfying as owning your own restaurant. Some of you may love to cook, but the thought of owning your own restaurant doesn't resonate with you at all. And see, if you listen to some of these entrepreneurial self-help podcasts or books, they would say, well, you love to cook. That means you should open up your own restaurant. You should open up your own business. No, it doesn't mean that. It means you should cook. Now, if you decide to go into your own business and cook, then fine. If you decide to do it just for your friends and family, well, then fine. But cook something at some point because it resonates with you. You may like to help people believe in themselves, but that doesn't mean you have to be a counselor and open up a practice and take in clients and listen to them. Perhaps you are simply an accountant, and you can help people by teaching them how to do accounting, or you can help people believe in themselves by simply providing them accounting services that frees them up to do other things in their life. You see, we get this stuff all mixed up because of these messages that we hear from a lot of self-help people that talk about pursue your passions and make it a career. And that's not always the best advice. That isn't always the things that we should do. And some of us feel guilty in our lives because we're like, well, we're not doing anything with our passions in order to make a career out of it. Well, that maybe isn't the way you should do it. I mean, it's crazy how we get all this stuff mixed up. And I'm sorry for such a crazy example, but for some females, they love having children. And I love having a child as well. And some women really love having babies, but that doesn't mean you make a career out of it. I mean, how stupid is that? Oh, I love having children so much, I think I'm just going to start having children as my career. No, you don't do that kind of stuff. That may be a passion, but it doesn't have to translate to a career. Another thing I want to mention is that you can get your worth from what you do, and many people do that. They base their self-worth on what they do. So you ask them, who are you? Well, I'm an accountant, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a policeman, or something like that. And I want to say, no, I didn't ask what you did. I asked who you were. And you are confusing who you are with what you do. But a lot of people do that. And you can certainly get your worth from that if you want. But I think it's far better to bring your worth into what you do. So you don't make your passion to be your end state. Your passion is the catalyst in your life. The fact that something resonates with you is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. So be very careful about labeling yourself with a passion. Remember what we said at the top of the show, passions can change over time. And the last thing we want to do is to so take on an identity because of our passion, that if our passion were to change, that we can't move and be fluid in going into something new in our lives because we're so locked into our identity of what our old passions used to be. So we've got to be careful about that kind of thing. Another thing is to remember that studies have shown that people are happiest when they help people. So how can you use your gifts, your talents, your passions to help other people? There are some types of passions that can be very self-centered, but I think if we really dug those out, I think every single passion that we may have can be used for the benefit of other people. Think about how you can help other people, how you can serve other people, and you will find that you are much, much happier in whatever you are doing if you can infuse what you are doing in helping people with your passion. Let your passion come through what you are doing to help and serve other people. I did say this last week, but we need to focus less on success and focus more on resonators, focus more on creativity and mastery. And also the last thing I wanted to mention about the passion thing again from last week. You remember when we talked about what are your 3 most favorite movies? Well, I was talking to a friend about this, and this friend was talking back and forth with me about wondering what his passion was, saying to me, well, I don't really think I have a passion and things like that. And I asked him what his 3 most favorite movies were. And so he mentioned to me Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Jaws. And I thought those were interesting, so I started kind of picking those apart a little bit because I wanted to see if there was indeed a theme in there. Because I mentioned to you last week, and I started thinking about this, well, gosh, what if someone came back and they mentioned all romance movies like The Notebook and Twilight, things like that? You know, is there a passion in there besides romance? And I'm not really sure. I'd be really interested if any of you do have kind of romance movies, if you do feel like there's a theme in there that strikes your passion beyond just physical attraction to another person type of thing. But I asked this person, I said, what's your favorite character in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back? Because I thought it was interesting that he picked the second movie and not the first movie in the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy. And he came back and he said, my favorite character in The Empire Strikes Back was Yoda, which is the little green guy who taught Luke Skywalker the Force, and he was in some of the later movies as well. And what I saw in those movies was a person who likes to lead in humor, because Yoda was kind of quirky and he would have this quirky sense of humor, and he taught how to use the Force. He taught Luke Skywalker how to use the Force. I saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, who was a teacher, you might remember, in college, but then he went out and actually lived it. He had a very sarcastic sense of humor. Even in Jaws, when they would go out and the sheriff, there was all about this kind of leading in humor. There was also this element of seeing beyond the box to solve problems, because they had to solve the problem with the shark attacks. Indiana Jones had to solve the problems with trying to seek the treasures. And through all that, we started talking about how helping people succeed and believe in themselves really resonated with this person. And this was actually their passion. Their big passion was to help people succeed, to help people believe in themselves. And this was an amazing thing. Now, maybe my friend actually knew this already, but I found it very encouraging, this particular exercise, how these 3 movies are very much resonators of his passion. And remember what we said earlier, I think this is one of probably 20 passions that he has, but it's definitely there. Now, whatever he does, and see, this is a unique thing about passions. When you can find a passion like this, I think many times you are so much better off than a passion that would limit you in some way. So for example, music can sometimes be a little limiting because it's kind of what it is. And I can't go and do statistics and do music at the same time. I can't infiltrate that. But let's suppose that was my passion, to help people succeed and believe in themselves. I can do that a multitude of ways. I can do that as a doctor. I could do that as a statistician. I can do that as a teacher. I could do that as a consultant in a business. I could do that as a trash collector. I could do that as a postman. You see, I can infiltrate that passion in a million different ways. And surely there will be certain expressions of that will resonate with me more than others. But this is a great thing to know. All right, so let's switch gears and talk about the secret to success. And this isn't going to be earth-shattering by any means, but again, I just feel like it's going to help some of you to think about this, especially if you really listen to a lot of podcasts that are kind of just go after it and pursue your passions at all costs and everything is going to be great. And I get so tired of those messages. I get very frustrated with those types of people. There's a really popular podcast, and I've listened to this person's podcast many times and do enjoy this person. I'm not going to mention this person by name because I don't want to sound critical of this person, but they're out there and they're selling these products about how to write books and how to build your own business, your own message. You can write blogs, do podcasts, do conferences and webinars and all these types of things. And they're out there constantly pushing this message. Well, you should do it. You can do it. I did it. So if I can do it, you can do it. Well, the only thing that they don't really talk about a whole lot is that this person was actually a CEO of a publishing company when they started doing all this. So they have all these amazing contacts with celebrities and authors and things like that. And I was listening to this person for many time before I started this podcast, and I actually thought, okay, I'm going to do what this person says. So I started reaching out and saying, hey, can I talk to you? Can I interview you? I'm going to start doing a podcast. Well, guess what? All those guys ignored me, just totally ignored me completely. And I'm thinking, well, this guy said it would work. Well, and then I started thinking, well, Brandon, look at his history. He already knew these people. He's like best friends with these people. And then I started listening to some other people who were listening to this person as well. And when I would hear about their success, I felt so bad for them because basically they had to bribe people. So they would go on YouTube and make crazy videos so that other people will listen to them and say, well, I guess I'll grant them an interview because they made a fool of themselves on YouTube. Or, well, this person sent me a gift, so I guess I'll give them an interview. So it was all just crazy stuff. And there's this element around a lot of podcasts, especially in the business area, of just, well, you can do it. And they don't tell you what the real secret of their success was. And say for this guy, for instance, he's not really adequately explaining the real secret to his success, which was like 10 or 20 years of his life to get to where he was. And he makes it sound like somebody can get to the same spot he's in a year or two, because he started out by scratch and just writing a blog post and things like that. And he doesn't really tell people, he's not very upfront about the fact that he had all these amazing contacts to begin with. I mean, it's just like me imagining I'm going to start up a sports podcast, and I'm actually related to the head coach of the Miami Heat basketball team, which I'm not. But let's suppose I was. Well, I would have access to LeBron James, maybe, because now he's moved back to Cleveland. I would have access to coaches, and maybe I would even have access to other people in other sports. So Johnny Manziel, friends with LeBron James, and Johnny Manziel plays football. And maybe now I have access to Johnny. So I start up my sports podcast, and all of a sudden I have LeBron James on there. I have Johnny Manziel on there, and I'm interviewing all these people. And then lo and behold, 6 months from now, I turn out this product about, hey, you can start your own sports blog and podcast, and here's how I did it. But nobody's going to be able to do that because I have these inside contacts. Anyway, my whole point is that success, the way it's usually taught, the way it's usually given out in most media, is not really how it's done. There are no real secrets to success. And I hate to burst that balloon, but I think we all need that balloon burst because we can listen to people and you hear it all the time. You see it on TV, for example, with weight loss. I'm always shocked by these commercials. They're like, here's this exercise program and you only have to exercise for 30 minutes a day. And look at these people. They lost like 100 pounds, 150 pounds. Well, guess what? You are not going to lose weight by exercise alone. That's just not going to happen. We all know that. But then we watch those commercials and we say, wow, if I just do this exercise, look what would happen to me. And don't realize that your eating habits are really what's the big driver for most people. I can't tell you how many exercise programs I've bought and started getting into them and wondering, why am I not losing weight? Well, it's because I'm stuffing my mouth full of junk food and expecting these workouts to magically transform me. There are no shortcuts to these types of things. Success is a very tough road. So let me give you the 3 things that are on the road to success. And again, I'm not going to tell you anything right now that you don't really know. So I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or wisdom in life or anything like that. But let me tell you what really makes a person successful. Let me tell you what really drives our passions to fulfillment. And it's simply three things. And it's actually a name of a rock group: blood, sweat, and tears. That's the big secret. And I really, really wish that somebody had told me that 20, 30 years ago. I really wish that someone said, Brandon, if you really want to be successful in life, I mean, whatever you want to do, the sky is the limit. Let me tell you how it's going to come. It's going to come through a lot of blood. It's going to come through a lot of sweat. And it's going to come through a lot of tears. So without getting too hokey with all of this, what do each of these three things represent? Well, to me, blood represents your essential person. And this kind of relates back to what we talked about last week. Who are you as a person? What are your passions? What are the things that resonate with you? What's the very blood that courses through your veins? We all have different types of blood types. We're all different types of people. There are some things that resonate more with one person than another. Who are you on the inside? Who's your essential person? If somebody were to cut you, what would you bleed? Would you bleed compassion and wanting other people to succeed? Would you bleed wanting to work with numbers? Would you bleed wanting to build things? Would you bleed wanting to plant things, to sow things, to cook things? What would you bleed? Who is your essential person? That is a very big element of success. And it goes back to, again, what we said last week. Passion is what gets you started. It is your compass. It is your direction. It doesn't really make you get there. What makes you get there are the next two things. The next thing is sweat. And basically what this means is it takes a lot of hard work. You aren't going to be a maestro on the electric guitar by picking it up and taking a few lessons. It's going to take a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of months and maybe years before you get to the point that you can be really, really good. I don't care if you have natural abilities. I once knew a violin player a few years ago, very young girl, I believe she was 16 or 17, played in a band with me and was really one of the most incredible musicians I knew. She had an amazing ear to her and just could play almost anything that she heard. But then I would watch her and see how she would practice. And she had a very, very regimented practice, and she'd been playing this way for at least 8 years, and that's why she was so good at it. And at the same time, I would throw her challenges, and she would struggle a few times, but then she would get it and master it, but it still took a lot of work. I think it was Albert Einstein who once said that genius is 1% talent and 99% hard work. Friends, talent is really overrated compared to hard work. Hard work is what really, really matters. And so many of us think that because we have a passion, that it should just automatically come to us, that we really shouldn't have to work at all, that we should just be able to sit there and it just comes through osmosis or just comes from the inside from some reason. So if I'm wanting to write a book, well, it should just come naturally. I should just be able to sit down and start writing it out and just come up with this book. And it's going to be great and everyone's going to love it. It's not going to take much work. I'm not going to have to edit it or do anything like that. And the fact is, that's a misnomer. You can have plenty of passion for something and still you're going to have to work very hard to get it. Ever since I was young, I was very good at math. I could just do it. It felt very natural to me. Even when I was in college majoring in sociology, my first 2 years of college, I still was very good at math and really enjoyed it. But guess what? I still had to work at it. I still had to study it. I still had to do homework. I still had to practice. I still had to take tests. I remember when I went to my first doctoral program, which I didn't stick with, but it was a very theoretical statistical program. And I took a course from the math department, and the math department and the statistics department were two different departments. And I come to find out they don't really like each other. So the math department doesn't really like the statistics students and feels very belittled that they have to teach these students in the first place. That was the first class I took that I really, really struggled. And I'm thinking, I've taken a class like this before. Why am I struggling so much with this? And it was very frustrating. And I'm sitting there thinking, math is natural to me. It's a passion. I've never had any problems. I've made A's in every single math course. And now all of a sudden I'm making C's and D's and almost close to F's on certain assignments. And I tell you that story simply just to say that although you may have a passion for something, it doesn't still mean you're good at it. And it doesn't mean that it's just going to come naturally without any hard work. It's the same thing with eating and exercise. I really wish, I'm sorry that our human bodies are this way. I really wish that we could just eat junk food for years and years and gain weight and not exercise. And then when we get really dedicated, I really wish we could just lose all that weight in 1 week of dedicated exercise and eating. But guess what? It doesn't work that way. You're lucky if you lose 1 pound when you start doing that kind of good eating and exercise. Some people may lose more initially, but then it usually slows down to just 1 pound a week. And that could be very frustrating, especially if you put on 10, 20, 30 pounds over 2 years and expect to lose it in 1 week. It's just unrealistic. And it may take you twice as long to lose it as it did to gain it in the first place. Life is just that way. Life takes some work. Life takes some sweat. And I know that isn't very popular to say. I know you pick up many books and it's all about just have your passion. And if you know your passion, go after it. That's all that really matters. And I'm here to say that in everything in life that I value, everything in life that I'm good at, things that I have passions for, it took a lot of work. Nothing really just came naturally. Now, in working it and learning it, there are some things that fit like a glove and came natural, but I still had to work at it. It wasn't something that was instantaneous. And I think this is important because sometimes we have passions and we have these understandings and we give up on some of our passions because we thought they would come easy to us. Oh, I thought this would be so easy. I thought I would just pick it up just like this. And it wasn't easy. And then we gave up on it. We gave up far too soon. We've got to look at this, although many of us maybe have never been raised around farming or in a farming district, but we must look at it like farming. You've got to plant a seed and you've got to tend to that and you've got to water it and you've got to allow over many weeks for it to sprout up and to finally produce some type of fruit. It takes some time. Or if you don't like that analogy, think of it like a baby. A woman gets pregnant and it takes 9 months for that baby to finally be realized in the outer world. Well, think of your life, and again, sorry for a crazy analogy, think of your passion as the womb of your soul, as the womb of your life, and you become impregnated with this passion, this creativity to do something. It could literally take 9 months. Are you willing for it to take 9 months of pouring your life and heart into it in order to see it express itself? And again, these are one of those messages I wish somebody would have told me 20 years ago. I wish somebody would have told me, Brandon, you're going to have incredible passions and creativity in your life, but don't think that means it's going to come easy. It may take a lot of hard work. It may take a lot of sweat before you can realize that passion the way you really feel it inside, the way that really resonates with you. Blood, sweat, and finally, tears. Now, I spent a whole episode on this topic, but I want to reemphasize it again. You will never know success without failure. And that's a very hard lesson to learn. It's a very hard lesson to really grasp and implement in your life because none of us like failure. But the road to success is paved by failures. We have to remember that success or failure is only an event in our lives. Mastery is a process. I was thinking on the way to work the other day that driving a car on the highway is very much a picture of success and of dealing with failures and things like that. So many times we think that the road to success should be a straight road, a straight line from point A to point B. Well, I don't know how many roads you've ever seen in your life that are purely straight. But if they are, they usually aren't straight for very long. I always find it interesting on going on the interstate somewhere that I'm driving down this road and then the road kind of veers a little to the left and then it will veer a little to the right. And I'm wondering, why did it do that? Because I'm looking around and there's no reason why the road should veer. I'm thinking, was somebody drunk when they did this road? But I'm sure there's a reason to it. Property line, something with the geography of the land. The road in front of us is never straight. The road to success is never straight. And on some roads, there are major curves. And to me, a curb is very similar to failure. Many times we go around loops, and that's called confusion. Sometimes we drive over speed bumps, and speed bumps are kind of like friends to me. Red lights, we call those enemies. Caution lights are like families. Sometimes you have a flat tire along the side of the road. But we always have a spare tire, which I will call determination. We have an engine inside the car that I would call perseverance. And the way that you get from point A to point B is through sometimes very curvy roads. And how often we can get frustrated because we were supposed to be heading in this direction and the road curves to the left. And if we are approaching life with a loose grip on things, not thinking it has to be completely perfect, then we can embrace failure. We can utilize it on our journey from point A to point B. We must learn to embrace failure, to even seek failure, to be extremely worried if we never fail, to never let failure be our identity, but as I said back in the failure episode, to use failure as a catalyst, because failure doesn't mean that we will never get there. It just simply means we haven't gotten there yet. And if you want to hear more about this type of thing, you can go back to episode 10, firstthingsproductivity.com/10, and that is the Overcoming Fear Failure episode. I also talk a little bit about fear in episode number 26 when we were talking about the now habit, dealing with setbacks. That is firstthingsproductivity.com/26. But simply, we must learn to embrace failure. And this is a hard lesson and something I really don't mind bringing up numerous times on various episodes because we still need to hear this. We have been raised, especially in America, to never like failure. I think it's amazing how in certain cultures, first and second is not positions of hierarchy, but they very much are in the U.S. I was thinking about this last week. If somebody came to me or to someone else in the United States and said that we came in second place, you know what many people's reaction would be? They would say, I'm so sorry. Like it's this terrible thing to not come into first place. As I've heard many times, you may have heard this phrase that second place is the first loser. And that's very much a Western understanding of first and second place. We hate failure. We look at it as if something is wrong instead of learning as a catalyst, a leaping point into success. And I will just simply state, you are not going to ever succeed at something in life, even if it is a passion, unless you are willing to fail. And I would almost bet that you will fail at some point, even if it's a passion. And that's something I wish somebody would have told me, because I would think if it was a passion, that would mean I would never fail at it, like I did with my math. I'm good at math, and I'm making hundreds on exams and everything like that, and all of a sudden I'm in a class and nearly flunking it. And I'm thinking, what's wrong? And it's so easy to say, well, that teacher is just terrible. Well, still, it's in my field. I should be able to master this. Well, no, sometimes things are just harder, and sometimes you do fail. Why am I failing? Can I really look at this and see why? Blood, sweat, and tears. Those are the secrets to the road to success, even for passions in your life. In fact, I would sometimes say that it is the tears that we face in life that can really sometimes help us know our passions. Sometimes we aren't even really aware of what our true passions are until we're face down in defeat, until we're bloodied on the ground of life. And we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, bandage up our wounds, and we start moving forward, not condemning ourselves for having failed, but learning why we failed. And then life can become one of the greatest teachers that we have. I said that in a previous episode. You don't have to go get a doctorate to be one of the wisest people on this earth. You just have to open your eyes and look around your very life. Your friends, your family, your coworkers will provide you a wealth of learning. They will provide you with your own PhD in life if we just have eyes to learn from them and to learn from our failures with them. Now, I want to play you a clip really quick from a lady named Catherine Schultz, where she mentions to don't regret regret. One of the things that we face in failure is this overwhelming sense of regret. And I found this video fascinating. I'll post a link up and you can watch it in its entirety. But this lady is talking about how she made a very unwise decision one day or one night, and she got a tattoo that she was extremely embarrassed about. And she uses this as an analogy for basically dealing with mistakes, dealing with failures in our life. And some of us have to get beyond that feeling of regret before we can really embrace failure and leap from that into success. So I want to play this for you now. I think you'd be really encouraged, especially if you're dealing with this type of thing in your own life.
So that's Johnny Depp, of course. And that's Johnny Depp's shoulder. And that's Johnny Depp's famous shoulder tattoo. Some of you might know that in 1990, Depp got engaged to Winona Ryder, and he had tattooed on his right shoulder, Winona Forever. And then 3 years later, which in fairness kind of is forever by Hollywood standards, they broke up. And Johnny went and got a little bit of repair work done, and now his shoulder says, Wino Forever. So like Johnny Depp, and like 25% of Americans between the ages of 16 and 50, I have a tattoo. I first started thinking about getting it in my mid-20s, but I deliberately waited a really long time. Because we all know people who've gotten tattoos when they were 17 or 19 or 23 and regretted it by the time they were 30. That didn't happen to me. I got my tattoo when I was 29, and I regretted it instantly. And by regretted it, I mean that I stepped outside of the tattoo place. This is just a couple miles from here, down on the Lower East Side. And I had a massive emotional meltdown in broad daylight on the corner of East Broadway and Canal Street, which is a great place to do it because nobody cares. And then I went home that night and I had an even larger emotional meltdown, which I'll say more about in a minute. And this was all actually quite shocking to me because prior to this moment, I had prided myself on having absolutely no regrets. Now, I made a lot of mistakes and dumb decisions, of course. I do that hourly. But I'd always felt like, look, you know, I mean, I made the best choice I could make given who I was then, given the information I had on hand. I learned a lesson from it. It somehow got me to where I am in life right now, and okay, I wouldn't change it. In other words, I had drunk our great cultural Kool-Aid about regret, which is that lamenting things that occurred in the past is an absolute waste of time, that we should always look forward and not backward, and that one of the noblest and best things we can do is strive to live a life free of regrets. This idea is nicely captured by this quote: "Things without all remedy should be without regard. What's done is done." Now, this seems like kind of an admirable philosophy at first, something we might all agree to sign on to, until I tell you who said it. Right, so this is Lady Macbeth basically telling her husband to stop being such a wuss for feeling bad about murdering people. And as it happens, Shakespeare was onto something here, as he generally was, because the inability to experience regret is actually one of the diagnostic characteristics of sociopaths. It's also, by the way, characteristic of certain kinds of brain damage. So people who have damage to their orbitofrontal cortex seem to be unable to feel regret in the face of even obviously very poor decisions. So if in fact you want to live a life free of regret, there is an option open to you. It's called a lobotomy. But if you want to be fully functional and fully human and fully humane, I think you need to learn to live not without regret, but with it. So let's start out by defining some terms. What is regret? Regret is the emotion we experience when we think that our present situation could be better or happier if we had done something different in the past. So in other words, regret requires two things. It requires, first of all, agency. We had to make a decision in the first place. And second of all, it requires imagination. We need to be able to imagine going back and making a different choice, and then we need to be able to kind of spool this imaginary record forward and imagine how things would be playing out in our present. And in fact, the more we have of either of these things, the more agency and the more imagination with respect to a given regret, the more acute that regret will be. So let's say, for instance, that you're on your way to your best friend's wedding, and you're trying to get to the airport, and you're stuck in terrible traffic, and you finally arrive at your gate, and you've missed your flight. You're going to experience more regret in that situation if you missed your flight by 3 minutes than if you missed it by 20. Why? Well, because if you miss your flight by 3 minutes, it is painfully easy to imagine that you could have made different decisions that would have led to a better outcome. I should have taken the bridge and not the tunnel. I should have gone through that yellow light. These are the classic conditions that create regret. We feel regret when we think we are responsible for a decision that came out badly, but almost came out well. Now, within that framework, we can obviously experience regret about a lot of different things. This session today is about behavioral economics, and most of what we know about regret comes to us out of that domain. We have a vast body of literature on consumer and financial decisions and the regrets associated with them. Buyer's remorse, basically. But then finally, it occurred to some researchers to step back and say, well, okay, but overall, what do we regret most in life? Here's what the answers turn out to look like. So, top 6 regrets, the things we regret most in life. Number 1, by far, education. 33% of all of our regrets pertain to decisions we made about education. We wish we'd gotten more of it. We wish we'd taken better advantage of the education that we did have. We wish we'd chosen to study a different topic. Other very high on our list of regrets include career, romance, parenting, various decisions and choices about our sense of self, and how we spend our leisure time. Or actually, more specifically, how we fail to spend our leisure time. The remaining regrets pertain to these things: finance, family issues unrelated to romance or parenting, health, friends, spirituality, and community. So in other words, we know most of what we know about regret by the study of finance, but it turns out when you look overall at what people regret in life, you know what? Our financial decisions don't even rank. They account for less than 3% of our total regrets. So if you're sitting there stressing about large cap versus small cap, or company A versus company B, or should you buy the Subaru or the Prius, you know what? Let it go. Odds are you're not going to care in 5 years. But for these things that we actually do really care about and do experience profound regret around, what does that experience feel like? Well, we all know the short answer, right? It feels terrible. Regret feels awful. But it turns out that regret feels awful in 4 very specific and consistent ways. So the first consistent component of regret is basically denial. When I went home that night after getting my tattoo, I basically stayed up all night, and for the first several hours, there was exactly one thought in my head, and the thought was, make it go away. This is an unbelievably primitive emotional response. I mean, it's right up there with, I want my mommy. And we're not trying to solve the problem. We're not trying to understand how the problem came about. We just want it to vanish. The second characteristic component of regret is a sense of bewilderment. So the other thing I thought about there in my bedroom that night was, how could I have done that? What was I thinking? It's this real sense of alienation from the part of us that made a decision we regret. We can't identify with that part. We don't understand that part. And we certainly don't have any empathy for that part, which explains the third consistent component of regret, which is an intense desire to punish ourselves. That's why in the face of our regrets, the thing we consistently say is, I could have kicked myself. The fourth component here is that regret is what psychologists call perseverative. To perseverate means to focus obsessively and repeatedly on the exact same thing. Now, the effect of perseveration is to basically take these first 3 components of regret and put them on an infinite loop. So it's not that I sat there in my bedroom that night thinking, make it go away. It's that I sat there and I thought, make it go away, make it go away, make it go away, make it go away. So if you look at the psychological literature, these are the 4 consistent defining components of regret. But I want to suggest that there's also a 5th one. And I think of this as a kind of existential wake-up call. That night in my apartment, after I got done kicking myself and so forth, I lay in bed for a long time, and I thought about skin grafts. And then I thought about how much as travel insurance doesn't cover acts of God, probably my health insurance did not cover acts of idiocy. In point of fact, no insurance covers acts of idiocy. The whole point of acts of idiocy is that they leave you totally uninsured. They leave you exposed to the world and exposed to your own vulnerability and fallibility in face of, frankly, a fairly indifferent universe. This is obviously an incredibly painful experience. And I think it's particularly painful for us now in the West, in the grips of what I sometimes think of as a Control-Z culture. Control-Z like the computer command, undo. We're incredibly used to not having to face life's hard realities in a certain sense. We think we can throw money at the problem or throw technology at the problem. We can undo and unfriend and unfollow. And the problem is that there are certain things that happen in life that we desperately want to change, and we cannot. Sometimes instead of Control-Z, we actually have 0 control. And for those of us who are control freaks and perfectionists, and I know whereof I speak, this is really hard because we want to do everything ourselves and we want to do it right. Now, there is a case to be made that control freaks and perfectionists should not get tattoos. And I'm going to return to that point in a few minutes. But first I want to say that the intensity and persistence with which we experience these emotional components of regret is obviously going to vary depending on the specific thing that we're feeling regretful about. So for instance, here's one of my favorite automatic generators of regret in modern life. Right? And the amazing thing about this really insidious technological innovation is that even just with this one thing, we can experience a huge range of regret. You know, you can accidentally hit reply all to an email and torpedo a relationship. Or you can just have an incredibly embarrassing day at work. Or you can have your last day at work. And this doesn't even touch on the really profound regrets of life. Because of course, sometimes we do make decisions that have irrevocable and terrible consequences, either for our own or for other people's health and happiness and livelihoods, and in the very worst case scenario, even their lives. Now, obviously, those kinds of regrets are incredibly piercing and enduring. I mean, even the stupid reply all regrets can leave us in a fit of excruciating agony for days. So how are we supposed to live with this? I want to suggest that there's three things that help us to make our peace with regret. And the first of these is to take some comfort in its universality. If you Google regret and tattoo, you will get 11.5 million hits. The FDA estimates that of all the Americans who have tattoos, 17% of us regret getting them. That is Johnny Depp and me and our 7 million friends. And that's just regret about tattoos. We are all in this together. The second way that we can help make our peace with regret is to laugh at ourselves. Now, in my case, this really wasn't a problem because it's actually very easy to laugh at yourself when you're 29 years old and you want your mommy because you don't like your new tattoo. But it might seem like a kind of cool or glib suggestion when it comes to these more profound regrets. I don't think that's the case, though. All of us who've experienced regret that contains real pain and real grief understand that humor, and even black humor, plays a crucial role in helping us survive. It connects the poles of our lives back together, the positive and the negative, and it sends a little current of life back into us. The third way that I think we can help make our peace with regret is through the passage of time, which, as we know, heals all wounds, except for tattoos, which are permanent. So it's been several years since I got my own tattoo, and do you guys just want to see it? All right. Actually, you know what? I should warn you. You're going to be disappointed because it's actually not that hideous, right? I didn't tattoo, Marilyn Manson's face on some indiscreet part of myself or something. When other people see my tattoo, for the most part, they like how it looks. It's just that I don't like how it looks. And as I said earlier, I'm a perfectionist. But I'll let you see it anyway. This is my tattoo. I can guess what some of you are thinking, so let me reassure you about something. Some of your own regrets are also not as ugly as you think they are. I got this tattoo because I spent most of my 20s living outside of the country and traveling. And when I came and settled in New York afterwards, I was worried that I would forget some of the most important lessons that I learned during that time. Specifically, the two things I learned about myself that I most didn't want to forget was how important it felt to keep exploring, and simultaneously how important it is to somehow keep an eye on your own true north. And what I loved about this image of the compass was that I felt like it encapsulated both of these ideas in one simple image. And I thought it might serve as a kind of permanent mnemonic device. Well, it did. But it turns out it doesn't remind me of the thing I thought it would. It reminds me constantly of something else instead. It actually reminds me of the most important lesson regret can teach us, which is also one of the most important lessons life teaches us. And ironically, I think it's probably the single most important thing I possibly could have tattooed onto my body, partly as a writer, but also just as a human being. Here's the thing. If we have goals and dreams, and we want to do our best, and if we love people and we don't want to hurt them or lose them, we should feel pain when things go wrong. The point isn't to live without any regrets. The point is to not hate ourselves for having them. The lesson that I ultimately learned from my tattoo and that I want to leave you with today is this. We need to learn to love the flawed, imperfect things that we create and to forgive ourselves for creating them. Regret doesn't remind us that we did badly. It reminds us that we know we can do better.
So I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was very refreshing. And the last thing I want to mention to you today is to be very careful about success, which may sound like strange advice. I'm talking about success. I'm saying that success is a road filled with blood, sweat, and tears. And when you finally do succeed at something, I'm telling you, very strangely maybe, to be very cautious when you get there. And why would you say that, Brandon? Because when you reach some type of success, when you start making money doing something or anything like that, most people quit working and trying. I don't know what it is about how we feel like we must go through life going up ladder by ladder, step by step, to get to where we think we want to be, and then we just kick back and think everything should just come automatically to us. That if we were really pushing ourselves to have ideas, that when we get there, ideas should just automatically come to us without much work at this point, that we'll never have any more setbacks, that we finally have reached somewhere. And that is one of the most dangerous places to be, because that is seeing success as a one-way street, as a linear thing that you're slowly climbing up to and then you finally reach it. But here's a much better way of looking at success. Instead of looking at it like it's some linear escalator going up from one floor to the other, we need to think of it like a circle, as a continuous journey, almost like you are a mouse or a hamster on one of those wheels that they run on. That instead of that fact that you are going from point A to point B in a linear fashion, it's more circular. So eventually, where you're walking on right now will come back around. It's not a line from point A to B. It's more like a circle that you travel on. So let's say that success involved things like passions, and then pursuit, and then work, and then assessments, and things like that. And we think, well, once we pass that stage, we'll never go back to that stage again. But no, you will. It is a circular thing. And if you reach some level of success, all it means is now you've moved back around to maybe where you started with, and that was passions. Anytime I ever achieve any level of success, especially now that I've learned this secret, I always go back and start thinking, what are my true passions in life? What's my true north? I may be on the top of the hill. I feel like I've conquered something, and then I will start asking myself again, what's my passions? Is this really a true north for me? And if it is, what's my passion in expressing itself in this mountaintop experience? Success is never an end. It's always a circular thing that we go through in life. We go round and around that circle. We've never fully arrived, and never think of yourself as having arrived at anything. And I'm telling you from experience, some of you know what I'm talking about here, where you've got to a certain point and you got lazy. You thought things would come easy. You thought that you wouldn't have to work anymore. And that very thing could thwart you. It could derail you. It could even cost the level of success that you have. I mean, think of this as you were a person and you were in sales. I mean, maybe this is a very easy example to give on this. You're in sales and you're constantly concerned about the customer, talking to the customer, relating to the customer. All of a sudden, you start generating a lot of sales, making a lot of money. Well, you don't have to work as hard. And many people would stop contacting customers, stop doing the very things that made them successful. Well, guess what? Customers get annoyed with you. They go other places. All of a sudden, you start losing business because you thought you had arrived. You did not keep the intensity that you had once before. Well, let's stop there. I hope this has helped some. Kind of struggled with what to talk about this week because I did want to talk about this topic, and I knew that it wouldn't be earth-shattering. But again, from time to time, I love talking about some things that I really wish somebody would have told me. In essence, I basically do that in every episode, but there are times when I hit upon something and it really weighs on me a lot. And I've seen some great successes in my life. I've also seen some really bad failures in my life. Things that I really thought would totally derail me for the rest of my life. So I'm speaking to you from a lot of experience and a lot of heartaches in life and telling you that failure paves the road to success. And success is not a dead end. It's not the end of the journey. Success is simply a comma in the sentence of your life. It's never the period. It's the closing of the chapter in your book. It's not the end of the book. It's just the closing of the chapter in your book. When you reach a success, a new chapter begins and you literally start all over again. Anyway, I'm going to shut up and not go back into all this again. As always, please consider leaving me a rating, comment on iTunes especially. Helps let others know about the show. And I don't think I've had any new comments, especially in July. I'd love to hear from you. As I mentioned last week, there are a lot of people in different parts of the country that I would love to get some feedback for. For instance, nobody in Brazil has left me a comment ever. Nobody over in France or Germany. I know I have some people who listen to me in Germany. Would love to hear some comments from you. I know some people in Italy and in Japan listen, Mexico as well. I mean, I don't want to just list all the countries. New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, Sweden. There's a lot of countries out there that I know have people that listen to the show. Would love to get some feedback from you. So please, if you will, consider leaving me a rating, especially on iTunes. Let me know you're out there. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what you've enjoyed, what you might like to hear in the future. Again, if you have any comments on this episode, feel free to leave that at the discussion area on firstthingsproductivity.com/49, as in episode number 49. So until next time, remember this. Pursue your passions. Yes, do that. But remember, you've got a multitude of passions that will change over time, and how you express those can change over time as well. But remember, as you pursue your passions, what really gets you from point A to point B is blood, sweat, and tears. Work hard at your passions. Realize that it does take some work, and realize that among that work is going to be a string of failures that you cannot let become your identity. They are simply stepping stones. They are simply catalysts on the way toward success. And even when you get to success, it's just the closing of a chapter and a new chapter begins. It's not the end of the story. And never make the mistake to assume it is the end of the story once you do get there. Embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.